Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
And other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Meade.
And I'm Christy.
In this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, well, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out,
but actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose.
Hey, babe, how are you today?
What's up, my friends? Good to see you.
So good to see you too, and I'm so excited to continue this chat about our mind and stories. And as we were kind of chatting about before we hit record, just like this is such a meat and potatoes episode. So if you guys are listening, don't skip this one because this is so important, because we're going to be talking about stories, and we're going to talk about what stories are, why they're so important, and how to deal with them. And the awesome thing I think about stories and all of this stuff that we're going to chat through today is that it applies not just to alcohol, right? It applies to like everything. And it's such a game changer, right?
Who knew that there were all of these stories that were like directing my life from like off stage and kind of running the show without my awareness. It's been mind-blowing.
Yeah, so true. Me too. So let's just dive right in and talk about what are stories. When we're talking about stories, like what do we mean? You go first.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, we talked last time about our other meat and potatoes episode where it's like meanings, where like our mind is always making things mean things. And that's how our mind kind of keeps us safe. That's how our mind, directs the show, if you will. And in doing that, we repeat certain thoughts. We repeat those meanings over and over again, and they form these stories that just are in our subconscious, in the part, of our minds that we're not aware of, that call the shots on what we do. And so that's why we end up with, when we have like conflict between, our conscious mind, like we talked about before, like I don't want to drink. Like I know alcohol has no, benefit in my life, but then yet we have the subconscious, that conflict that comes from that, because there's that subconscious story or belief that says that there's a perceived benefit for doing that thing. So, but I need it to be a better mom. Like it makes me a better mom. And it applies. Like we're always telling ourselves stories, like the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, stories we tell ourselves about alcohol, about fill in the blank, and it directs our actions. So might as well know why we're doing the things we're doing, and this is the way to do it.
Yeah. And we make things mean so much more than they actually really do mean, right? And I think with stories, in addition to alcohol, I think the other big one too for me has always been like other people, right? It's like and it comes down to really silly basic things of like, if a girlfriend is like short on a text or short because she's in a, like I make it mean that she's mad at me because I did something. And what did I do? Do you ever do that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, that's just it. I had no idea that those, like oh my gosh, she's upset with me. I had no idea that was story and wasn't fact. And we're like, fact is she sent me a text. That's right. A fact. There was a text that came through, but anything else that comes after that is story. And that story is formed through like, it's our perception. And so it's like, again, that lens, like we said last time, these meanings that we make, it's that lens for which we view everything from. And it's all of our stories, are based on our own past experiences, our individual experiences. So while someone could look at a text from a friend and, say, oh my gosh, she must be upset with me. And that feels like truth. And it shows up like truth in our lives. Someone else could look at the same text and go, I mean, no, like there are all these other possibilities. Like, how did you get that? So that's that layer of story that I think is, I mean, it's just fascinating. Who knew?
Yeah. What percentage, do we have it down here in our notes? Like what percentage is story? Is everything fact or is it mostly story?
So like, yeah, I know this is where we can get into the weeds a little bit. And this is where, that's a place I love to live, right? I love to go like really detailed on this, but for the sake of, keeping this
Keeping it light. Keeping it light for you girls.
So I don't like nerd out here on this stuff. It's, like it's like the facts, the indisputable facts. You received a text.
Mm-hmm.
What anything else that comes after that, she must be upset with me. Anything that comes from that also like is story. It's when 10 out of 10 people could say something different in response to that for me has been a good gauge for like where it's story. So I can say, she sent me this text, and so then she didn't respond for like 6 hours. She must be upset with me. Whereas my husband could look at that and go, or she got busy at work, or, and so that's the difference between story that I think is, it's hard to kind of see. And also like, once you see it, you're like, oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think was like one of the most like, I don't know, I guess one of the loudest stories when it came to alcohol for you? I mean, I know we've talked about a few of them, but like what was one that you just, I guess it's a better way to say it is like, what was one that you like believed to be truth so hard that it took you a while to get to the other side of it?
Yeah, for me, I think like, the biggest overarching story was it was necessary to my life. I thought wine was necessary to my life. What about you?
Yeah, so good. I think it was just, the Band-Aid and the treat and the reward. Like, I think those three all tied together, which is so funny because they're three very different jobs. But I guess that's another way to say it, right? It's like giving alcohol a lot of jobs, giving it so much more meaning. When in reality, like you said, the fact is you got a text. The fact is that it's fermented grape juice in a glass, and we give it so much story and we give it so much meaning. It's wild.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, we all bring all of that color from our past experience. And the reason why the mind does that, and the mind does it so quickly, is, the mind likes to put things into, it's quickly assessing, like it's scanning for danger and threats. And so it quickly, when we feel discomfort, it's looking for a quick meaning based on our past experience. And it goes to that low hanging fruit, whatever we've told ourselves before. And so these stories that become those unconscious stories that are driving the car in the background of our lives, they're practiced thoughts and practiced feelings that all get kind of tangled together that just become these really deep-seated beliefs. I remember when, kind of doing this work and realizing that I was like, well, gosh, now that I know the difference between like fact and circumstance versus story or belief, like, is anything I think real? Is anything I believe? Are all of my beliefs false? Oh my gosh. And I almost had this like panic of.
I remember Scott Pinyard saying that and having like an existential crisis. Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, everything I've ever believed is not true. What do you mean?
Yeah.
But in that panic is also where all the freedom comes, because it's in the being able to question them and look at them and know what is right, and then what is the impact of that. So if we have that belief, like I'm not a normal drinker, well, how does that make us, when thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings create our kind of actions, our behaviors? When I think I'm not a normal drinker, how does that make us feel? Like flawed and deficient? Well, are we more motivated or less motivated to do something about this thing that we're feeling related to our, use of alcohol? Like, we're less likely maybe to do something about it when we feel that. And so that's where the power of these stories, these beliefs, are so important to kind of question.
Yeah, so true. And one of the examples I see all the time with clients, and I know you do too, is like, I actually wrote this as a note to myself when I was coaching someone this week. And it was literally just, I literally wrote, like, you have to stop hiding behind this personality trait, right? Because how often do you hear, but I'm just the type of, oh, and listen, I did this all the time. I'm just the type of person that dot, dot, dot. Or that's just my personality. Like, that's who I am, right? And it's like, where did we get all of that? They're so limiting. I mean, talk about a limiting belief. Just hiding behind those, like, I am just the type of person that can't moderate, or I'm just the type of person that can't have 2 glasses of wine, or whatever it is. It's like, it's just, it's so limiting, and it's such story.
It is. Yeah. It's so true. I did that too. I hear it all the time too. And it's where we end up becoming, the thing that we say that we are. And along with that are all the limitations. So yeah, when, I can't moderate, or I am not someone who can moderate, guess what? Like, we're going to find in action, in behavior, we're not going to be able to moderate, whatever that is, air quotes. And so, like, especially words like I am, any kind of declaration, it's a declaration. And when we're saying I am, we are declaring this, like, really real, truth about who we are. And I had no idea how prevalent that was in the background for me, directing everything, how I was showing up in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. It's just, it goes back to, I think, right? It just goes back to take every thought captive. It just goes back to, and when we get into, like, kind of how do we deal, and how do we deal with story? And I know I said this last time, but I just get so excited about the fact that, like, as Christians, we do have the truth. We get to hold the truth in the Bible. And so when we're talking about, like, okay, let's dive into the story and figure out whether it's true or not, like, we actually do have truth. We hold truth. We can hold it in our hands and read it and pray about it.
Yeah. Which, is half the battle, right? Is being able to, like, where do we find that truth? Where do we find the answer to, is this something I believe? And I think when we do this work, it's important to, at least I have found it's super helpful to think about it in terms of, like, well, first of all, how do we access the stories? If they're unconscious, how do we make them conscious? Well, through our thoughts, right? And really kind of getting into paying attention to what our thoughts are. And we've talked about, through thought downloads or brain dumps and journaling, and through meditation. We touched on that last time, like finding that space between ourselves and our thoughts, thinking about our thinking, the metacognition that comes with that. It's in accessing our thoughts that we can start to see that, like, our thoughts are the branches of a tree, and the beliefs, the stories, are what make the trunk. And so just, kind of maybe taking a couple of days, 48 hours to just kind of very mindfully bring attention to your thoughts and writing them down, not making them mean anything, not judging them, but just putting them down on paper, and then coming back to them later and seeing, okay, where are the patterns and themes in these? Because those patterns and themes point to these kind of beliefs that we carry that are coloring everything we do, every way, how we show up. And so, through the thoughts, we get access to the stories. And then the part about where stories, if we don't have the goal of, like, we have to change the story, we feel better. We're more curious in our exploration of that. So if we go into doing this work and say, okay, now I'm gonna do all my thought. I'm gonna get all my thoughts. I'm gonna find these stories, and then I'm gonna just start trying to disprove them. We have the end goal as them being opposite of what we already believe. That's where we can run into some tension, some friction, and create this more conflict or dissonance around it. But if we go into it with this idea of, like, I don't know, do I believe this still? Is there a possible other way of looking at this? Is there a possible other story? It's in finding, is it true? I don't know. But in that kind of turn to curiosity and keeping it open, we're not trying to make it fit something. and creating that kind of tension in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And I feel like, kind of under the same guise of not making it fit, but like at the same time, when you do kind of start to get curious and you do this work, right, you really do realize that there are some big ones that it ends up always coming down to, like, and it has to do with like our own worthiness. It has to do with our own lovability. It has to do with being, helpless. Like these are some like big themes. What, like when you really, really break it down, it's like it kind of all comes down to how we view ourselves. And then that's just like such a, like, when you've done this for a minute, it's an easy one then, right, to take to God and be like, okay, well, what do you say about this? Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. I love Byron Katie's. She has a list of like universal beliefs on her website, that, just kind of going through that list and saying like which ones, it helps with this like curiosity of like which ones are ones that potentially are those universal beliefs that, I don't belong, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm weak, I'm flawed, all of those. When we can use that as like maybe a jumping off point to take it with our thoughts, and then we can take it to the Lord and say, but what do you say about this? And getting that clarity. I mean, obviously through prayer. Prayer is something that is so obviously powerful. It's something that I used to have a story around prayer that said that it's just me making request of God, and it's a one-way conversation, or not even a conversation, because it's just me making requests and, waiting for him to kind of answer on those. And, one of my beliefs I had to change, one of the stories that I questioned was like, well, is that really what prayer is? Well, let me see what the Bible says about prayer, and, let me figure this out. And through doing that, oh my gosh, like so much more amazing prayer time. It's something I enjoy doing now because it's actually conversation with God, and being able to say like, hey, I need help with this. And what is here? Like, why am I, what do you want me to see here in this? I see it this way, and it's through the, limitation of my eyes. Well, I'm not looking through your eyes. Help me see it through your eyes. What do you say, Lord?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. One of my stories about prayer was like very similar. Like it's just me asking for things, but also what I had tied in there was he's got enough on his plate with other things that are more important, which comes down it's right back to the worthiness. Right back to the worthiness.
Sister, that is, oh my gosh, we could do a whole episode on that, I think, because it's so true. I'm not allowed to make my requests because I don't have real problems. Like, So if prayer is about like asking for help, well, I mean, if you look at my world, I don't really have any real problems. Whatever a real problem is, another story, right? I don't have real problems, and so I shouldn't be, taking up his time asking for these seemingly trivial things, but because they're bigger things in the world, right? Gosh, I love that you mentioned that.
We should just also add notes, and we'll put it in the show notes, about if you haven't heard of Byron Katie, like she's such a good like go-to for understanding this work. I think you have to, I love her, and I think you just have to take her with a big biblical grain of salt. But her book, Loving What Is so transformative, and I listen to everything on Audible, so it's also on Audible, but we'll put that in the show notes if you guys want to dive into like more of like kind of this stuff. It's so good.
Yeah, it's one of those that I was introduced to, and it was hard to wrap my head around at first. But so powerful in her thinking. But to your point too, like kind of holding it, loosely, lightly, using the resources to kind of pique your curiosity. Like, so, I think that is our two greatest tools for doing this work are discomfort and curiosity. Like, discomfort, once we acknowledge discomfort in something, that is our opportunity to, get to the bottom of like, what story is causing this discomfort? Where is this coming from in my thinking? And when we bring awareness to what that is, and we don't hit the easy button, in response, because that's how we're so trained. We don't have tolerance for discomfort these days because of all of our modern, advances and things technology wise. But that allows us. I had a story that was like, I'm not supposed to be uncomfortable. Like, I need to switch out of discomfort. And as long as I thought that, I made discomfort bad. And it was something that, right, like, it was like, okay, quick, do the thing that's the easiest thing to do to get out of discomfort. So obvious now why wine ended up taking up so much space in my life, because it provides a really quick, easy button if that is a subconscious belief or a story that you've been spinning for so long. So
yeah. And when we were talking originally about like doing this podcast, like we did talk about like, okay, are we just focusing on alcohol here? Because obviously that's both of our journeys. But when we're talking about this stuff and, what do you reach for instead of curiosity when you feel discomfort? There's so many fill in the blanks. Maybe for, listener, maybe it's not alcohol. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's online shopping. Maybe it's food, sugar, exercise. Like all of these things can be the fillers, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Noise. For me, noise. So one of the, before I got into this, before I was able to even know what creating space between my mind and my thoughts look like. And, anytime I had discomfort, I can think about it now, it was call somebody. So like, I could never just be alone and still and silent and quiet. And so it was, as soon as I get in the car, it's turning on music, turning on a podcast, calling a friend. I could never just drive in silence, being in the house without people, like something. I always have to be, listening to something or doing something. Another story, right, that plays in the background that says like discomfort is bad, so distract yourself. What it ends up, being obviously is like these distractions keeping us from being in that like place of consciousness of awareness for what is showing up right now, what we're sensing and how we're making sense of that thing. What are those thoughts that go along with it?
Yeah, I can so relate to that too. And I actually just recently realized that was one for me too. And that it completely was not leaving room for stillness with God. Like, be still, he says, just wait, chill out and be still. And I was not doing that like at all. And then, to your point of like, what is prayer? Well, it's a two-way street. If you don't do the be still part, it's hard to hear. Right. And so, yeah, that one too. And I still struggle with that. Like, I have to have something going on at all times. And it's the day and age we live in, right? It's like, there's always another podcast or another book I want to listen to or another lecture or whatever, or someone I want to catch up with. And so if you don't leave that space to be still and do this mind work or talk to, be still with God, you just completely, you don't leave room for this work at all.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that was huge that was one of like the first revelations I had was, I was caught in the doing, which is, when you're caught in the doing and the distraction and all of that stuff, like the distraction is attempting to relieve that discomfort you feel. And the doing is this like hustle for worth that we're going for. Yeah. It's like, if I can just, keep pushing, producing, achieving, pleasing, yes, performing, tap dancing, just here, put on this and, and go. And what I was doing prayer, how do I do prayer? Make my request to the Lord. Like, I was so constricted and so limited in, of course, before I found all of this work, that I didn't see that it took like life is in the being, and being with the Lord is the kind of the foundational for all the rest of it, creating that space to be without all of the distraction.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just comes down to like, it comes back, and I think I keep saying the same thing, but it comes back to who we are in Christ and who we are as Christians, right? Because if we don't have to strive and we don't have to keep doing and achieving, and we can just be, and we can, it just, it all goes to, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it kind of just all goes together.
It does. And no, you're making total sense, because it's exactly, the way that we've just kind of talked about it too, well, if that is directing your life, but it's unconscious, it's like, well, we can know that it's, who we are in Christ, but we're not even realizing that unconscious story that I have to do all of these things, these transactional things for love or worth or belonging, those are in total conflict, and we don't even have a clue. It's calling the shots. And so that's where also we've talked about the great cheat sheet and being able to go, okay, like where I'm feeling conflict, where I'm feeling this discomfort, what is the story in my thinking, like where is the story in either who I am or who I believe you to be, Lord? Where am I off on that? And, what do you want me to see here as the truth? Like, what is the truth of this? Where's my thinking gone off,
Yeah. And I think that's a really good like segue then into like, how do we deal with these stories? Like, what are the tools? Like, what is the framework that we both use, and like all of that good stuff. Like now we've addressed like what story is, we've addressed how important it is, and given examples. Now what do we do?
Well, gosh, like so many different directions we could go. But yeah, from a very like practical sense, I think, that first, it goes back to taking our thoughts captive. And we do that. One of the ways, one of the ways I do that is paying attention to, in particular, any shoulds and any I ams. I ams are those, like we said, declarations of truth about who we are, which is not true, right? Like if you're like, no, it's not true. And then the should automatically points to shame, to lack. And if it's shame driven, then it also is in conflict with what the Lord says about, who we are. And so I personally have gotten, and it takes a lot of practice. This is not something that it took trying differently. Like it took trying a bunch of different things for me to land on like, what are my tools? And those are two that stand out for me. Like anytime I can bring attention to when I'm using I am something or should, that's where I know that I've got a story to explore. And that's where turning to curiosity is a place for me to start with. What about you?
Yeah. So good. And for me, this is so big with just being anxious and having anxiety. Anytime that I'm anxious about anything, I have to stop and figure out what it is, what are the facts and what are the stories of it, right? And so this morning I actually did this. I'm going to read it out because I did this morning, and I'm not going to go into like the whole personal situation behind it, but we as a family are in a state of transition. We'll just say that, right? And so we are trying to figure out where God is going to take us for multiple reasons. And so my first thing was to like get really clear about what that thought was. And my thought was, God won't provide. And it was crazy, right? Because like, you're going to laugh, but like the second I wrote God won't provide, I was like, is that true? Nope. Like I literally wrote, what is the thought? God won't provide. Is it true? I literally wrote, nope. What does God say about this? And I wrote, he's told me and shown me over and over a million times, ... like a lot of times, ... that he does. And so then, we get to make a choice. And this all comes back to the fact that we actually get to decide if we're going to be anxious about things or not. And so am I going to make the choice to trust God, or am I going to make the choice to believe this thing that's totally false that he's disproved a million times, 100 ways to Sunday? So like for me, this work is just so good when it comes to feeling anxious.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I think you highlight what's so important I found too, is that like getting those thoughts out of my head, because I can think that I know what I'm thinking, and I can think that, well, I don't have any story. There's no story here, but because I'm in that like tunnel of discomfort around whatever it is, I can't see that actually there is a thought there that then you can, once you put it out on paper, it's like, oh, well, obviously that's not true. sometimes it's just the awareness of what that thought is that allows us to find that clarity, that freedom, that space from the, what's causing all the discomfort. It's like, we don't even have to change anything because it's so obvious that that is not true. Sometimes, like, I need wine to be a better mom, or it helps me be a better mom. That is a practice that takes like collecting evidence and coming back to you and experimenting with and getting, really curious about. But when we're in that kind of curious mode, we're afforded the clarity to find the answer versus when we're just spinning it around in our head. So I think that's so good. I love that. I have things in my journal like that too, where it's like, oh, duh. Like how many times do I have duh written like in my journal? Of course not.
Yeah, it is so true. And I think you make a really excellent point. I think that's from Legally Blonde, but, that some are easier than others. And with some story, just the awareness in and of itself is like so groundbreaking, just to bring awareness to what we're thinking. But other things you do need to like dive into, like whether or not it's true and where it came from, and have to live life experience the opposite of what you believe. And that's what breaking free from alcohol is. So much of that. It's so much of like, okay, I think that this story that I'm telling myself about alcohol isn't true, but I'm not going to believe it until I go to 7 parties with 6 different type of friends. And then I'm going to believe that I don't need alcohol to have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to experience it as true for it to be a new belief as well. Like it's that kind of like threading it together. And if we don't, we can say like, I'm pretty sure alcohol, like once I brought awareness to, one of my big stories is that it was helping me be all the things for all the people, that wine was necessary to be all the things to all the people. Once I brought awareness to that, it was very easy to go, well, okay, like if that is a story and that, by definition is just an untruth, then the opposite of that would be that it doesn't help me be all the things for all the people. Well, but how do I feel when I hold that opposite belief? I mean, it doesn't feel believable because I've just said that actually, this is what feels true. So how do you make that like leap? Well, if you're just trying to go with the opposite, you create that kind of like more neural toxicity, if you will, like, the trap of positive thinking. Okay, like I'm just going to repeat over and over again. No, it does not help me. But if we don't truly believe it because we haven't experienced it through our body, through our like a felt sense of it being true, we haven't experienced that yet, then it's just going to create more toxicity. And so I think that goes to so beautifully how, kind of you were saying that it's the experimenting with it, trying it. Like, I don't know, I'm going to go into this situation and does it help me be a better mom? Well, I'm going to be really curious about this tonight when I'm doing, bedtime and bath time with the kids, and with my glass of wine in my hand. I'm going to pay attention to it. Like, how is it helping me? How is it serving me right now in this moment? How is it not serving me in this moment? I don't know. I don't have any conclusions for where this will go. I'm just going to get really curious. I'm going to hold that and I'm going to write about it afterwards. I'm going to write down what I came up with. I'm going to collect that evidence. And I think that's where we turn what we know to be like what we know maybe is false, or what we're starting to see is maybe false. And that's where we kind of lock it in as it being our new belief, as feeling true. Until we do that, it kind of just, it doesn't feel right yet.
Yeah. And I feel like this is probably going to end up being like an episode all on its own, but I think it's important to like note here a couple things. First of all, this is why willpower doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is why
never say that enough. Yeah. Like, yeah.
This is why willpower doesn't work. This is why like you're not going to self-discipline your way into not drinking. This is why it's not about your motivation. It's just that's all the things that we we're conditioned to believe our whole lives. This is why this is why everybody struggles with diets. This is why everybody struggles with drinking. Not everybody, but whoever's listening to this probably is
why anybody could struggle with drinking.
Right. Yeah. Good. Yes. Good change. So this is why willpower just doesn't work. And this is why affirmations, I think there's a place for them, but you're not going to just tell yourself a million times over and over the opposite, like exactly what you said. You're not going to convince yourself the opposite of what you believe until you kind of like really get curious and do this work from a place of total and complete curiosity and experimentation and all of it.
Yeah. We have to have that like embodied sense that this other way, this other story, this other belief is true. And I think that's something too, that like one of the tools, one of the things that like listeners wanting to look at this work is starting with, bringing more attention to our senses, to what we're sensing, because that's where we get that confirmation. So like when my conscious mind and unconscious mind are aligned, when my mind and body, if you will, are aligned with each other, there's a peace, there's a calm, there's an absence of tension and conflict and irritation. And so bringing more, and if we go back to kind of like how we queued this whole kind of little series of the mind up, it's, if we feel discomfort and then our mind is quick to make it mean something based on all of those stories that are underneath it all, in that making sense, we've skipped the part where we're attuned to what we're sensing. Like, what is it that I just feel off? Okay, but where do you feel off in your body? And so one of my favorite kind of tools, if you will, is like, I call it getting into the body, reconnecting to the body. And that allows us to be in that like consciousness, like, well, where does off feel in your body? I feel it right here in my belly. Maybe it's connecting through the breath first. Like, how do I know that I'm breathing? Where is that proof of my breath in my body? That's something that I had no idea that I, for 35 plus years of my life, was literally holding my breath. I couldn't have located my breath in my body if you had paid me. I had no connection to, and that's a whole, like why we become so disconnected from our bodies and the things that we sense. Obviously there's a whole other side of that we could talk about, but just bringing attention to our senses. And that's also a place to kind of couple with the curiosity. What was that like for you?
Yeah. I mean, as far as kind of the first realization of like this work, or what do you mean?
Well, I just mean like related to like, how do we know that it then is a belief that serves us? Like, how do you access that? Like, what does it feel like? For me, it's like a peace and a calm that I feel in response, but
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that a big piece of this for me too was, I think that we always come to it from, okay, I'm feeling X, right? And so like when you said it's, where is it in your belly? Like anytime I'm nervous about anything or feel uneasy, like it's always a stomach ache for me, right? And so for me, it was like getting really curious about, okay, what is this? Like, what is this? Why do I have a stomach ache? And then figuring out what the thoughts and the story were causing that, right? And it's and so I think that the bodily sensations, of, if that makes sense, is a tip off to the discomfort. Then you can figure out where the discomfort is coming from, and then you can get into what the story is that you're telling yourself, right? I mean, I know that maybe sounds really basic, but I think that was a huge revelation for me when I realized, okay, like I'm feeling nervous, and it's not just that like I am feeling nervous because I'm a nervous person or because whatever. There's a reason I'm feeling nervous. And what is that reason? And what is the story behind it? And is it true? And like, just, I mean, again, it comes down to awareness, curiosity, all the things we've said. But I mean, that was a big piece for me when I was like, okay, well, the stories for me show up as stomach aches.
Yeah. I love that example, because I think that also points to how we talk about like how this work, Oh my gosh, y'all. Just knocked my mic.
Her mic
I
went
get
flying, you
really
guys.
excited. I
Gosh.
cannot not talk with my hands. And yeah, like it points to how this work that I always anyone that's worked with me knows that I always talk about, like, this is the forever work that we get to do. It's amazing because it really fits into everything. And of course it does. But it points to how like story shows up everywhere. So we can sense something in our belly, and a million times before, if we're not conscious of, like, we have just made it mean that I'm nervous, and so that is what we go to. But also we could, we can even expand from there. It's like, okay, well, what else is possible? And, or this thing that I'm feeling over here, I have in my head that this is, automatically that, that I'm caught in a mind swirl. Well, does it automatically mean that I'm in a mind swirl? Or is it just like, I had a really hard workout today, and so when I feel this tightness in my shoulders, it could mean that I'm in the mind swirl, or I'm stuck on something. Or it could just mean I had a hard workout, and so I did a lot of overhead stuff and I feel that. It's in finding those other possibilities, because our stories are so one way, this is the way that we see things. And so using all kind of bodily sensations as a way of just being curious about them and exploring them can be access to what are these deeper stories that we carry about alcohol, and also the stories that we're telling ourselves, those universal stories that we all tell ourselves about ourselves, and how is that like directing how we feel and how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
And is that aligned with how we want to feel and how we want to show up in the world?
Right. What would you say? I'm asking this question because I feel like this comes up a lot with clients, and I'm sure it does with you too. Like, what would you say to a client, or let's say like a listener that is stuck on a story that they believe so hardcore to be true? Like, what would you say to them? Like, what do you? Because I get this a lot, right? It's like, this is what I'm worried about, or this is the thought that is keeping me up at night. And when I ask the question, sometimes like, well, is that really true? Like, is that true? What are you making that mean? What is that? Like, let's get in. And they're like, no, that is true.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, I would say like, okay, well, when you believe that, how do you feel? And then how do you show up? And is that how you want to feel, and how you intend to show up? Is that aligned with your intention? Because it feels really true. And so you're going to hold on to that belief. I think Byron Katie, I think she's the one that says like, who would you be without that story?
Who would you be without that thought? Yeah. Yeah.
So like, yeah, nobody's telling you have to do anything with it, but we as coaches have that ability to like see that where that conflict is coming in is through it feeling really true and being, stuck to that. So it's like, okay, just, but what if it's not? Like, you don't have to say that it's not true, but what is that kind of like ladder step up? I'm open to seeing if this is not true, because I'm open to seeing, if I feel better and show up better as a response. It's like finding that little, we talk about those little ladder steps up on the belief scale. Okay, you don't have to jump all the way to, yeah, you're right, it's not true. It's okay, I'm open to seeing, or I'm open to exploring this, or maybe it's finding that next like neutral belief up from there. So that's a good one, because for sure it's also a choice to hold that belief. And maybe that just means that that's not something you're ready to do the work on, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to do anything. If you want to, bringing awareness to what these things are. Like, I kind of feel like if these are the things that are directing my life, I'd at least like to know what they are and have some input into, what they are, so that I can align them to what my intention is.
Yeah. So good. So good.
So good. I also feel like we should mention gratitude as something that, and I feel like it's one of those that we talk about, like kind of all the like cliche thing, like mindfulness and gratitude, and it kind of falls into that like, okay, well, we know that we should, air quotes, should be, have a gratitude, or we've seen maybe even science that says that like having a gratitude practice is helpful, or, we know what it talks about in the Bible related to, praising God, gratitude for things, being grateful. But on like a practical sense, I also find that anchoring to what I am grateful for very specifically is a way that helps me kind of relieve that initial discomfort I'm feeling, and allows me to like open to curiosity, to exploring beliefs. And so the more I can train my brain to seeing and celebrating what there is to be grateful for, what there is to praise the Lord for, what there is to celebrate, we're also training our mind away from where the lack is. And that's what the mind really wants to do, is look for where's the lack, where's the problem. And it's constantly scanning for that. But gratitude is a great way to kind of access that as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And I love that. And I was reading that this morning, actually, in Philippians 4, like he kind of like gives a like an outline of how not to be anxious and how to deal with anxious thoughts. And the first thing he says in verse 4, is rejoice. Before he even gets to prayer, before he even like says whatever, it's starting with rejoicing in the Lord. And so, I mean, we need to do a whole episode just on gratitude, I think, because it's so important. But
so true.
I'm glad you brought it up, because we needed to mention that here for sure.
Yeah, that might be just a way for someone to start, like, what do I do? Okay, so there's a lot of information in this episode. This work is big. It's super, kind of dense, if you want it to be, and doesn't, you don't have to do any of it, but what would be something you could kind of just I always like to leave clients with like one tiny new action you can take from, what you're uncovering and discovering. What's one little tiny thing you can do? You don't have to do it all, like one little thing. And I think gratitude is a nice little place to start, sometimes, giving us that forward momentum and energy to keep staying open.
I love that. This was such a good one. This is such a good one. It goes so fast, and I'm hoping that we can just keep talking about this over and over and over again, and just make it, because I think it's sometimes hard, right? Because we've been doing this work for a little bit here, and so I'm hoping that we're making it like understandable and relatable to the listeners. And I think that, we're just going to keep talking about this, and we're just going to keep giving our own real life examples, and to make it as like easily and as accessible as possible for you guys, because I think it's changed both of our lives. And so I hope we're explaining it well for you guys.
I think that, like we've talked before, like we just keep showing up and having the conversation. And listen, y'all, like this is not going to be perfect. We're going to we're going to say things, we're going to repeat things. We're going to, that's my like kind of one of my limiting beliefs that I always carry is it's around like, I'm repetitive. I'm always saying the same thing. But like I might, or I might not. And, okay, great. Like we're not going to say things perfectly, but hopefully, at least it stimulates your curiosity to be able to enter into this work or continue this work if this is something that you're, currently working on. And if it does leave you confused, send us reach out, because we want to help answer those, send the questions in. We want to answer those questions. We aim to do that. So
yeah, we've structured this podcast, you guys, so that every single episode is intentionally a question. And so our hope is that we can, pass this over to you and like have you guys ask us, what you want us to chat about. So, to that point, I guess I should mention that like on our website, we also have a community. We have different ways of you guys getting in touch with us, and a mailing list and all that stuff. So the website's obviously in the show notes, but we want this to be interactive. We want you guys to come with your questions. We want to know what we're not explaining right, or like not right, but you know what I mean? We want to know how we can help, I guess, right? The whole purpose of this is to help you guys. And the whole purpose of this is, for, his good and the glory and all the stuff. But please let us know if you guys have questions, because we want to chat about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's keep the combo going, girl.
Whoop,
Love
whoop.
it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. You can find all of our episodes at butjesusdrankwine.com, and make sure you follow us over on the gram at butjesusdrankwine.
To learn more about what we do, you can visit our websites at meadhollandshirley.com and lovelifesober.com.
Take a screenshot of this podcast and share it with a friend or two.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't have to worry about missing a single episode. And if you love what we're doing, please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify.
This helps more women who are feeling stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle to find hope and encouragement.
Thanks, ladies. We so appreciate you. We'll see you next week.